The Shark Deck.
Something a little different today. Hi, I'm Johnny Mac with your Daily Comedy News. Today is a 40-minute interview with Jackie the Jokeman Martling. Why? He's got that new documentary. It's called Jokeman. It's out on July 18th. And I reached out to Jackie, and he got back to me within 90 seconds and said, yeah, sure, I'll do it. So we did it here. I could have talked to him forever. I had so many questions left over. He's such a good guy. Even before I could send him the thank you email, he had reached out to me in text and thanked me. Hope to have him on again because there's so much I didn't get to. So I'm going to jump right in here. I will warn you, it's a little naughtier than usual. Some of the language, some of the topics, a little naughtier than usual. So if you usually listen to Daily Comedy News with your 5-year-old, maybe not today. Nothing too bad, but not today. Jokeman out July 18th on Apple, iTunes, and Amazon. Go to jokemanmovie.com for the latest information, jokemanmovie.com. Here's my interview with Jackie the Jokeman Martling. When you agreed to do this, I'm like, I'm not going to be like, hey, tell me about the show. What else can I ask him about? I started thinking about your music. I got to tell you, I'm not just feeding you a line. That Thinking About You song, even before I watched the doc, I remembered that existed. I've been walking around for 5-6 days humming that. I was doing the yard work this morning, and I'm like, that thing is catchy. Why don't you do a clean version and give it to like Jimmy Buffett?
It is. It's just such a wonderful thing, the way it came about and everything. I actually did a kids version called Saturday, but I've been meaning to go in and record it because instead of because you can say smoking pot now.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So I can say I'm smoking pot. I've got my cocktail, which is perfect. But then the song just goes so far into the rabbit hole, but it doesn't have to. It could just be silly things. I'm mowing the lawn and picking my nose and I'm thinking about you. It doesn't have to be dirty. So we'll take your compliment and I will take it to the bank. That's what
I was trying to get a songwriter's credit. I was thinking I've got my phone out. So when you get the Grammy, I get a piece.
There you go. That song was up for an AVN award. My buddy Eric Middleman was editing a porn film for this very good friend of his. Her husband edited all the cartoons and pictures for Hustler magazine for 25 years. And he passed away and left her a lot of money. And her one desire, Erica McLean, was to direct a porn movie. And she directed a porn movie called Pink Pigs or whatever it was. And he was editing it. And I went out to visit him. And he said, I'm editing this Erica's porn movie and I'm running the credits. Can I run your song on the credits? And I'm like, of course. So we put it on there. And the thing gets nominated for an AVN award. And I find out that the guy who was in charge of that is what's his name's brother? Either Richie Cannata or one of the members of the Billy Joel band. And I said, that's so great. And then we went out to the award show. It turns out it was one of 17 nominations. And it's one of those awards that they don't give at the award show. It's like a technical award in that genre. So they gave out the award in the afternoon. Of course, it didn't win, but it was, he got the guy's name. He's such a good friend. It was his brother. I said, I can't believe he used my song. He said, Jackie, I heard that song. I put it in. I had no idea it was written by you. He said, I just like the song so much, which was very flattering. Well, of course, it didn't win, but being nominated for an AVM award, and nobody has to know the details.
So I found myself, that's the Adult Video News, if I'm remembering, AVN Awards. I found myself in Vegas at those awards one year. It's serious. They got you doing all kinds of things. We're out there, we're broadcasting it. And we had a big round table and everybody's getting up there and the nominees for whatever disgusting combination you want to come up with.
Oh, unbelievable.
The titles of the movies had all those great puns, take a real movie and make it dirty. They're getting up there. They're taking it seriously. So anyway, they give us a gift and I go back to the hotel room and I open it up and it's a glass phallus. I'm trying to keep it clean.
Of course.
And I'm like, what am I going to do with this thing? I'm like, I'm not bringing it home. I'm not bringing it on the plane.
No, there's a very obvious answer to that. I went to those awards a couple times and of course, all those porn fans are huge Howard Stern fans. And I was with, I don't know, a couple of the higher ups. And because it was started when it was the pamphlets, when the AVN news, the Adult Video News was a pamphlet. They came on the Stern Show in like 1986 and Howard made fun of Paul. What's his name? You're an idiot. You're an idiot. And 5 years later, he's a multi-zillionaire with this huge award show. But we're walking down, and the red carpet wound all the way around the Venetian. It was huge. And the fans were like 6 or 8 deep, the whole length. I'm like, now I thought Stern Show fans were, these people. And of course, they all knew who I was. Jackie, that was the amazing thing was we went in and the awards are interminable. It must have been 4 hours. So I want to thank Mother and Jesus for this triple anal like crazy. And when we left, those people were all still there when we walked back down the red carpet. I'm like, now that is some fans. Holy mackerel. Like that packed some punch there, those AVN Awards.
Full red carpet. The year I went, the house band was Smash Mouth, actual Smash Mouth. Like, they're not messing around.
No, Paul Fishbein. It was red hot for so long. I don't know, he's probably still red hot. I went a couple of years. Oh, it's so funny because there was this really pretty girl. My friend Toby Ludwig came with me and we're looking around and we found out we weren't going to be part of the awards. If we win, we're not even going to know it. And so we're standing around though with all the stars or whatever, kibitzing. And I start talking to this girl. She's so cute. And I had somebody take my picture with her with the iPhone, but I don't know from porn. And I go home and I show it to Ian, my partner on Jackie's Jokeman on Sirius. I said, look at this pretty girl I met at the awards. He goes, are you kidding? He said, that's the world's most famous squirter. I'm like, how would you know that? How the hell would you know that? I can't think that's dirty because if you know what that is, that's your own fault. It could be a water pistol.
That also means somebody's the world's second most famous. Well, I just wanted to talk to you about music and the porn awards. So thanks for your time. And
that's all right. All
right. So this documentary, I saw it. It's amazing. Now, you've been working on this for a while because both Norm and Gilbert are in it. What's the origin of this? And so I do this podcast since I left Sirius. I've been doing this particular podcast 4 years now. And every day I Google comedy and I've got news alerts. I hadn't seen a thing about this till you actually announced it. That's neither here nor there. But how long has this been going on?
For a long time, when I first got off the show, there was a couple of people interested in doing it, and then they fell to the wayside. And then some other people were doing it. And my friend Tom did a weird version of it, but it wasn't really documentary. It was like almost like an episode to what could have been a longer show. And it was the greatest 20 minutes in the world, but I don't know what for. And then these other guys started it. And then Ian said, this isn't it. Because the whole thrust of what they were doing was all about Jackie, how big he was and how great he was. And then like an idiot, he walked away from the Stern Show. And he said, that's not your story. He said, that's one of your stories. And he wanted to make it about jokes and how that's what I do. And of course, the reason people know me is from the Stern Show. And that's what got me rich and famous, in quotes, of course. But it wasn't my life's blood. And he started working on it, but it just takes a long time to tape people and find them and track them down. And then the pandemic, of course, threw a monkey wrench into everything. And then Netflix showed some interest. They weren't going to buy it, but they were going to put it on Netflix, which is a big deal. And then, of course, just when they were thinking about doing it, I don't know if you remember, Netflix took a dive and went right into the toilet for a while. Like, if that doesn't tell the tale of my career. But the funniest story is that Artie Lang agreed and he wanted to be in it. And Ian just couldn't match up with him. And then Artie wound up in the hospital and wound up in jail and wound up in rehab and went through all these changes. But it took so long to do the documentary that he was cleaned up and out and back in good shape so Ian could go and interview him, which is a happy accident. And he's one of the best things in the documentary. So I love him for that. And it just it just has taken a real long time. And then getting a distributor. And then even once you have a distributor, it's another 6 months. I'm like, Ian, I only have one request. Can we please put this out before I die? I'm no kid. I'm 53 years old. I haven't got that much time left.
53. I'm 53 and I listened to you when I was 10. So I'm not sure that math works.
All right. Put your hands away.
Hilarious.
But I'm just thrilled. It's coming out July 18th and I'm very excited. And we just got a link for the pre-order and the interest is so great. It's so funny, John, because I left that show so long ago, and I just got a couple today. I got an email from a guy in England And he said, "Hey, it's great to hear about you and your documentary. I'm from England and I'm 40 years old and I discovered the Howard Stern show about 10 years ago. The years in the 90s with you on them are my absolute favorite. And I can't wait to see the documentary." And a lot of people that weren't even around when I was on the show, they find out about the show and then they go back and look at the shows from the 90s and they're so complimentary, which is great because it's not just the 75-year-olds that will listen in and all the people that listened back then, they all have jobs now. In the year 1992, they were driving pizza delivery trucks. Now they own businesses, so they don't have to sneeze when it comes to, buying a movie or chipping in for this or that. And people the most common thing people say to me is, "I owe you. You made me laugh in my roughest of times. You got me through my divorce. You got me through a tough job. You got me through college. And thank you for all the laughs." And I'm like, all the thanks, that's all I need is the thanks. They say, "Oh, my favorite is that you must get tired of hearing this, but thanks for all the laughs." I said, if I ever get tired of hearing that, put a bullet in my head. I will never get tired of hearing that. It's the nicest thing you could say.
Those years were so good. I'm a power listener. I happened to be listening to NBC when Howard took over afternoon for the New York run. I was there. I'm a high schooler. I'm commuting. I'll give you my hot take and then I'll give you probably the answer in my heart. The answer in my heart is I think the peak years, and you talk about it in the doc, are that range where the puppets were around and maybe it peaked with the recreation of the Al Michaels Baba Booey call. Maybe that stretch there with Billy in it. But my hot take, and I'm going to blame you, I think the show peaked 5 seconds before Baba Booey. I think it was funnier when Gary would walk in and Fred would hit that Italian theme 100% of the time, all the time, every time, and I missed it.
What you're saying is the Baba Booey took the work, took the creativity out of breaking Gary's balls. It was always like a look at Gary's ass or you look at those teeth, and it just became Baba Booey. And it was like a shortcut to the laugh. But I don't agree that might have been where it peaked, but it stayed in the plateau. I'd say from 87 to all the way till when I left, it just felt like it got hotter and hotter, or at least in my mind, because we just kept adding stations and all the gigs I did. And my price just went up and up and I was turning stuff down and it just was so much fun. I didn't leave because I was unhappy. I left because I thought I was going to die. If you work all week, getting up at 4:30 in the morning for 5 days, and all of a sudden it's Friday and it's time to go rest. And they're waving what was to me stupid money to come to Denver or come to Dallas or come to Chicago. I worked too many jobs for $100 or $300 to turn down that crazy money. So I'd get on the plane, I'd go do a show Friday and Saturday and God knows where, and then fly home and start again on Monday morning. And ragged is not the proper word, but it was a happy rag. It was fantastic. And once I sat in that chair and had a cup of coffee, I was good to go. 5 hours, boom, pow, funny, pow. Of course, on the drive home, the caffeine, and I walk in, and the first person I'd see when I walked into my house, I'd bite him, whether it was the cat or the dog or my wife.
I produced John Gambling's show in the early 90s. So first of all, I'm producing him thinking 3 minutes ago, I was listening to you guys making fun of him. But the hours it kills you. You're constantly tired. I'm in my early 20s. My friends want to hang out by 1 a.m. on a Friday night when it should be peak party. And I'm like ready to kill somebody to split a cab and go home to bed. And then it's Sunday and 3 p.m. You're like, I got to start going to bed already. It's awful.
John, I do the show all week. Then we got a TV show. So we have another whole show to come up with. And then I'm flying to God knows where to do a gig. But of course, if I show up in Chicago and go out and do a gig at the Chicago Theater or the Old Vic, it's so much fun. But that radio station, they're paying me a fortune, but they want some bang for their buck. So I didn't have a choice but to go out and party with them at the strip club or at the party or at the bar. And it was great fun. But you talk about using toothpicks to keep your eyes open. Here's naked girls running around and endless booze and everybody wants to jump on your lap. And like you're saying, I'm looking to see if there's a dark corner where I can lie down. But it was great. And people how dare you complain about that? I'm not complaining, but I'm merely setting the scenario for what it was really like. It was so great, so great.
Now, why didn't you jump on another show? Is it just you were at the peak of the mountain and this is going to be stupid?
I was never asked. And it's so funny because everybody listened to the Stern Show and they all loved the Stern Show and thought it was so funny. And so many people knew how much I had to do with making Howard funny. I got no offers from anyone. The one offer I got was from Anthony Cumia, wanted to give me maybe a show, but I forget how long after. It was a while after that. Just there was no interest. Now, whether Don Buchwald, Howard's agent, had told the world that I was impossible. They always talked about on the air how hard it was to work with me, and how nobody liked me. And meanwhile, I was the favorite with all the sales girls and all the salespeople. I mean, when I walked in their office, they all loved it because they're always laughing and having fun. But Howard made it sound like I was a real dick, which I absolutely am not and wasn't. But I was never asked. I was never asked.
You stole my next question that I did want to ask you if you thought that perception of the Jackie character had bled over to real life because, now everybody loves you. In the doc, people love you. In real life, I love you. This audience should know I emailed you. You got back to me in 90 seconds. I'm nothing to you. You're doing me a favor here. Nicest guy I work with.
I live for this and I don't understand it because you'd think even just to have me in the room, if you got a writer's room with 8 guys working, just to have me there breaking balls. I sat in one writer's room. That's when we sat around reading the script, the private parts, and my one ad lib that day wound up being the funniest line in the movie. The sloppy pussy line was the funniest line in the stupid private parts movie. And that was just something I threw in at the table read because it was so boring. So I just said that and everybody cracked up. There's a whole story. And then I didn't even use it in the movie because nobody said anything. And then they said cut. And the guy came over and literally whispered in my ear, "Hey, you remember what you said at the table reading? Why don't you try that line?" I was like, all right. Well, God forbid he say it out loud and somebody have any idea it was my idea. And it wound up being killer. Sitting around at the table with guys that are writing a sitcom or a movie, you only have to contribute 2 or 3 things like that to make it worth people's while to have you sitting there. But I never got asked. And I don't know why. I really don't.
It's weird because even if you were a pain in the neck, which you are not, we both know talent wins out. Like, he's a pain, but he's killing. We got the #1 show. We'll deal with him. It's not like that doesn't go on.
Everybody knows that. You put up with anything to get a couple extra laughs or a great idea. But that's one of the great quizzes. People say, why didn't you have something lined up? I said, number one, I didn't have any intention on leaving because I didn't ask for so much money that I thought it would stop them in their tracks. Who knew? But I wasn't out looking for the next place to get up at 4:00 in the morning. I'll tell you that.
Sure.
God forbid I had been offered that. Thank God. But it's all interesting. And the way it works out, I left my job, got divorced, quit drinking, and moved into a house all by myself on the water, all 4 at the same time. And they say if you do any one of them, you shouldn't change anything else in your life because it's going to be such an adjustment. So I'll tell you, it was a little rough for a while. It was a rocky road. You make do and you get through. It's just been wonderful.
All right. Thanks for the segue there. You just dropped into Rodney. I had no idea that you worked with him. I learned it from the doc. What was that guy like? So that's a guy that had success pretty late in life. And from what I'm gathering, got the success and enjoyed it to its fullest. Is that what I'm getting?
Yeah, he didn't right away. I got to send you my book. If you haven't read my book, you will love my book. The whole story about how I met Rodney and how I wound up with him is one of the best things in the book. And we got hooked up and I went away with him for 2 weeks in 1980. And to this day, when I'm talking about it, I still think of things that I forgot happened. It was spectacular. We just had such a good time. We were a week in Fort Lauderdale. He wasn't even working. He was just down there on vacation with his daughter and her girlfriend. And then his son showed up. And then we flew to Las Vegas and he headlined for a week with Paul Williams at the Aladdin. And it was just storybook. And it's 1980. I've been doing comedy for a year. It was, but I sold him what he said was the best joke anyone ever gave me. Of course I love. It was just, I will email you that chapter special. I'll email you a couple Rodney chapters because All the Rodney stories are just so fun. And they're all true. And then he wasn't necessarily that funny. Just his attitude. When I first went to pick him up to take his daughter to the airport, I said to him, listen, boss, you got to understand, every time you open your mouth, I'm going to laugh because it's funny. whatever. And that's all it takes,
Yeah.
You get that character. It's like, everything is so downtrodden and blah, blah, blah. And then when I was with him, he had just done Caddyshack, but it wasn't out yet. And he had to leave Vegas and fly to Los Angeles to do the reaction shots for the film. But he was in the point where he was starting to get really well known because I don't know if you're old enough to remember, but he was in these Miller Lite commercials.
Sure.
With every sports star, baseball players, basketball players, fighters, football players. They were all in these Miller Lite commercials and Rodney. It was whatever athletes and Rodney. And they played him every 5 seconds. And he said, I can't believe it. I used to do Martin. And I'm like, Carson. Nobody knew me. Now it's like, hey, Rodney, they all know me. And all of a sudden he's feeling like it's coming on strong. And he literally, I swear to God, he said to me, yeah, but it's a little late. What am I going to do? I'm 58 years old. What do I got? 2 years left? I said, what's wrong with you? I said, no, there's nobody in better health than you. 2 years left. You're an idiot. I would yell at him. What do you know? Great fun.
Performance style. You laugh at your own jokes. Can you walk me through the performance aspect of that? Why are you doing it? What does it do for the audience?
There's no calculation to that. If there is a calculation to that, it's something that just wound up being so part of me forever. I was always the guy at the bar or the party telling jokes. And I've always thought the jokes are so funny. And I really do. Jokes I've told 1,000 times, I still think they're funny. And they make me giggle. And sometimes I'm thinking about who told them to me. But when I worked at a country club here on Long Island, the Piping Rock Club, the most blue blood club in the world, there was a Dutch salad man named Jake. And I was the head busboy, so I did nothing except yell at the other guys to get to work. And I would stand there and tell this guy, Jake, joke after joke. And he would stand there like a wooden Indian, if I'm allowed to say that. He would just stand there and maybe smile. And the more he didn't laugh, the harder I laughed. Because I'd gone back and trying to figure out where the whole thing emanated from, the genesis. And I would always laugh. And then when I told jokes in the bar, I was usually half sauce and I'd laugh. And I just always did that. But it wasn't like, let me laugh at my jokes and maybe that'll help. It had nothing to do with it. I laughed at them because they were funny. In the very beginning, when I'd only been doing comedy, well, I always told jokes in my bands, but I'm doing comedy and telling jokes and laughing at myself. So we're down at the comic strip in Fort Lauderdale. It's funny. I just had this guy, Bill McCarty, on our podcast this week. And I was with Bill McCarty and Mike Brown. It was like 3 or 4 or 5 comics. And we're so long ago that there was actually a television in the comedy condo. Those days, there hadn't been a television or a phone in the comedy condo for 40 years. We're watching TV, and it was like Red Skelton's 75th birthday show. And I used to sit there and watch Red Skelton with my mother, and she used to watch me laugh at Red Skelton because I got such a kick out of him. And we're sitting there, and he's standing at the microphone, and he's telling jokes, and he's waggling his arms, and he's laughing, having a time of his life. I can still remember Bill McCarty turned to me and said, Martling, that's you. I said, but not consciously. I do it the way he does it. He does it the way I never looked at Red Skelton and said, hey, that looks like fun if you laugh at yourself. It's just something I've always done. I mean, I've gotten in trouble with it. People out, that's such crap. Like Howard would do anything to not let me get too out of control. So if somebody said, Jackie, tell this joke or tell that joke, I start to tell a joke. And I always start to giggle because it's inherent to the way I perform the jokes. And you see, Robin, there's the tell. There's the juice to get it. Like, shut up. This is the way I do it. I say, look at Rodney pulling on his tie. Oh, you think that's going to help? Shut up. But it was always just so fun to just tell him, be silly. But in the world of comedy, I call myself a joke teller. I'm not a stand-up comedian, and I'm really not. I started out doing that, but I didn't. My family was rough and my father treated me bad. And, who cares about that crap? And I just love the jokes. But in the world of stand-up comedy, there are 2 ironclad rules, and they are, you don't tell old jokes. Well, I hate the expression old jokes because every joke is new until you hear it. Then it's an old joke, which pertains to every single person for every joke. If I tell you a joke and you haven't heard it, it's a new joke. And once you've heard it, it's an old joke. And people, if you think about it, of course that makes sense. But in comedy, stand-up comedy, you don't tell jokes and you don't laugh at yourself. Those are the two ironclad rules of stand-up comedy. And that's all I do is tell jokes and laugh at myself. They want to skewer me, but I'm like, you know what? Enough people come up to you and say, that's the hardest I've laughed for an hour in my life. That's all I need. That's all. I'm not trying to educate people or give them anything. People say, you didn't write that stuff. You didn't write. I'm like, when you go to see somebody do Hamlet, you in the middle of the thing, you stand up and say, you didn't write this crap. They're performing. It's a performance. Either they're good at it or they're bad at it. You just try to relax and enjoy it. Sit back and laugh a little.
I love the rat-a-tat-tat. Like, I'm a big Bob Hope fan. I know everybody gives him garbage because of the last 25 years. But, if you look at Hope in his prime, getting up, I could listen to a 60-year-old joke. Hey, it's great to be here at the Cleveland Air Base. General Jones is so cheap. I get it. I don't need to know who the general is. Rat-a-tat. And then he'd mug for the camera and pull a laugh out of you. It works. It's good.
And Bob Hope is Woody Allen's favorite comedian. And when people first hear that, they're like, that's ridiculous. No, it's not. The guy gets right to the joke and gets the laugh. Well, that's the whole idea. People come up and tell me that how a little old lady will come up and say, that's the funniest show I ever saw. That makes my week.
Yeah, you talk about in the doc about stripping the jokes back, and it got me thinking about, I used to call it when I'd go to a million shows back in the serious days, I used to call it the comedy matrix. I remember sitting there one night, it might have been Patton, it might have been Posehn, but I was sitting there with one of the hosts, and I felt like I could see the matrix. I'm like, all right, premise, he exaggerated it, callback, and I'm like, it was like in grammar school when you'd graph a sentence. I could see the whole thing. So I appreciate it when you started talking about just stripping the joke down. Let's get in.
I don't know what I said in the doc and what I didn't, but I talk about in my book that I wrote the Penthouse joke page for 20 years and they were great. And I used to put all my friends' names in it. They always got a kick out of it. Instead of a guy went into a bar, Minervini walks into a bar. But the Playboy jokes were so annoying because they'd say, the pretty young blonde sauntered into the bar and moseyed onto a bar stool and slowly took out a cigarette. And I'm like, yeah, a girl walked into a bar. That's all you need. Or maybe a girl walked into a bar because you need that. You know what I mean? Like you just cut off all the garbage and get right to it. So many people say to me, I can't believe I'm out there laughing at a joke. And I'm in the middle of laughing at the joke. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, I've heard them tell that 5 times. They don't even realize it. But if they're already laughing, it's too late, right?
Yeah,
that's a compliment.
Hope would say, I'll do 6 jokes a minute and maybe one of them will land. That's great.
But which is fine. Hey, Mickey Merrill only got to hit 1 out of every 3 times. That's how it works.
Jump in here with a quick break. Jokeman on most platforms, iTunes, Amazon, where you ever get your stuff. July 18th.
Do you love your Peloton?
Oh, I sure do.
Well, I know you do because you started a podcast about one. If you love your Peloton and can't get enough of it and all the news that goes along with it, you should check out our show. It's called The Clip Out. It's a great place to go for instructor news, new classes, motivational tips, corporate machination.
We don't just tell you the news. We also give you our thoughts on why things are happening. And each week we also interview a member of the Peloton community. Sometimes it's, somebody like me, just a regular person riding their bike.
Sometimes it's Snooki.
You never know.
You never know.
The Clip Out is about anyone who loves their Peloton.
Every week we take you behind the scenes and inside the world of Peloton. The Clip Out is available wherever you get your podcasts or check out our website,
theclipout.com.
More from my conversation with Jackie the Jokeman Martling. His documentary, Jokeman, it's fantastic. I've seen it. You want to see it. It's on most platforms July 18th, 2023. Jokemanmovie.com for more information.
I want to ask you about some people. What was Sam Kinison really like?
Sam Kinison was a great guy. He was really out of control. People get mad at me, but he, in real life, was not funny. Not even a little bit funny. but a real nice guy. Couldn't have been sweeter. He knew what he was doing. And he was so good to me. You know, he found out I was taking my wife to dinner and he made me take a couple $100. He put it in my pocket, wouldn't take no for an answer. And he had me come open for him at Westbury Music Fair. And he already had 3 opening acts. I was the 4th opening act.
Wow.
And that was the famous night when he got so screwed up in between shows that he walked around in circles and 80% of the people left and demanded their money back. But he couldn't have been more fun because he was so out of control. One of the greatest moments on the Stern Show ever, we were sitting there 6 a.m. The show had just started and boom, through the door comes Sam Kinison, Pat McCormick, the kiddie show guy. What's his name? Jack Riley from the Newhart Show. And who's the kiddie show? Chuck McCann.
Okay.
So Pat McCormick, Chuck McCann, and Jack Riley and Kinison. He got done with his set or something at the Comedy Store, or else he saw the guys and said, hey, this is boring. Let's get in my jet. Let's go to the Stern Show. And they just flew in his jet to New York and came piling into the Stern Show, drunk and stoned. And I'm sitting there next to Fred, and behind us, I got the Mount Rushmore of comedy. It was surreal. I have no idea if it was funny, but if you were in that room, like Fred and I are looking at each other cross-eyed, like, holy God. Now that is the definition of wild.
Yeah.
And he was so fun. He was a terrific guy.
How'd you get hooked up with Willie Nelson? He's my mom's favorite. We're hoping to go see him in August.
He is such a delight. I worked in a recording studio. I always like to tell the story because it's interesting. I worked in a recording studio in the 70s and a band named Zebra. Did you ever hear that?
Yeah.
So Zebra did a lockout where they locked the studio for 2 weeks and so they could record their album. So they were the only clients for 2 weeks. It was right at Thanksgiving time. So I brought Randy Jackson, lead guitar player. I actually brought him home to my house because I said, you're not going to New Orleans for Thanksgiving. You're coming to my house. So he came to my house for Thanksgiving dinner. And we're all really good friends. And then that's 1976 or something. So cut to however many decades later, I get an email. Jackie, this is Felix from Zebra. I don't know if you remember me. And I wrote back and said, I spent 2 weeks up your butt. What do you mean, do I remember you? And he wrote back, do you like country music? And I'm like, yeah, I like everything. He goes, so listen, my girlfriend, it's his wife now, my girlfriend is a masseuse, and she does the Jets and the Giants and Woody Harrelson and Willie Nelson. And Willie's working tonight down at Webster Hall. Do you want to come see him? We're on the guest list. So I hadn't seen this guy in 25 or 30 years. I meet him. We have a beer like it was yesterday. We go to see Willie at Webster Hall, and we're upstairs. I don't know if you know the place.
Hey, yeah.
Men's room is in the basement. So if you got to take a leak, we're talking about 3 flights of stairs. I'm already so loaded. I don't know what time it is, but Willie's been going for a couple of hours, and it doesn't look like he's ever going to stop. And I go down all those flights to take a leak, and I'm on my way back up. And I'm like, you know what? If I go back up there, I'm going to wind up on the bus with Willie. I'm not going to sleep, or I'll probably miss the show. I'll get in so much trouble. And I made the call to blow off getting high with Willie Nelson and took the cab back to my apartment. I wanted to kill myself. A couple of weeks later, Felix Hanneman, the bass player and keyboard player, says, listen, we're going to try again. Willie's at the Westbury Music Fair, and he really wants you to come. Because when Willie was on the show, I always got these guys' addresses, and I had Grillo get me his address or his company, and I sent all my CDs and all my joke books and everything to his company. So they'd put him on the bus. And Gator, the bus driver, they all loved all my jokes. So I was their friend already. So Willie wants us to come. So it's me and my wife, Felix and his wife, Lisa, the masseuse, and 2 of the New York Giants. And we're walking around the catacombs of Westbury looking for a place to get stoned. And then the show is over. And Willie used to sign whatever. If there's 300 people outside his bus, he would sign stuff for everybody. First, he'd go to the bus, get a little stoned and relax a little. And we went out there and they looked out the bus door and said, Jackie, come on, you guys, Lisa, come on. And me and Nancy and Lisa and Felix and these 2 giants, I think they were in season. I remember. And we're in Willie's trailer in his bus, which is immense. And I'm sitting at this little Formica table across from who's to me a god. And I said, this is something, you won't believe this, but it's a true story. I said, Willie, I got some great homegrown. He said, let's spark it up. So I took out a great big joint of homegrown. And Willie I swear to you, John, on my mother, he starts looking for a match. And I said, Willie, I'm flabbergasted. You've been on this bus for 50 years and you've been smoking pot for 70 years and you're actually looking for a match. It was just, I'm giggling. So all these little drawers, like a rock and roll bus, I pull open a drawer and there's a copy of my CD, Hot Dogs and Donuts. And I'm telling you, my heart leaped. I was so excited. And I took it out of the drawer and it was still in the plastic. And I said, Willie, this just went from being my favorite story to my least favorite story because I know I'm going to always tell it. It's always going to have this ending. And then we got a man, and then we just smoked pot. And then a couple of weeks later, there was one of these things. You probably knew about it. Sony was doing a thing where it'd be an artist and you could email an idea or call in an idea or send a letter and they would take requests. And it was one night, it was Dr. John and Willie Nelson. And I knew the girls from Sony. And all of a sudden, it's 2 or 3 weeks later, and I'm in the bus again across from Willie. He goes, what are you doing here again? I was, I don't know. I guess I know people. And we've been very tight since then. You know, we exchange jokes by email like every couple of weeks. I send the most disgusting jokes, and I say, is that okay? I sent that one, and they'll send back one that's even worse. And he's just, I was on stage with them at Radio City, you know, it's just a thrill to know the guy. Just a thrill to know the guy.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for your time. We're going to get kicked off. Like I said, I'm cheap. I was like, the 40 minutes flew. I got 5 million more questions for you. The doc is fantastic.
I love you for saying that. And listen, why don't we do this again when you can actually order it or something like that? And listen, I'm here. If you need me, just let me know. Somebody cancels, call up and say, Jackie, I got a spot. I'm always ready, John. You're always good to me. I appreciate it.
I'll take you up on that. I got 20 questions I didn't get to, but love you, man. Thank you so much for doing this.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And again, I can't thank him enough. You know, we crossed the halls at Sirius, and he'd come on the Raw Dog channel a bunch of times. So I know him a little bit, but we're not like tight. He did me a favor here, and you could hear how much time he gave me. And seriously, I could have gone another hour with him. I had so many questions. I wanted to ask him about Gilbert, and I wanted to ask him about David Brenner. You know, you may have noticed that I didn't talk much. I studied Johnny Carson growing up, and the secret to Carson was he knew when he had a good guest, shut up and let the guest tell stories. So me laughing over Jackie or going, just let the guy rip. You heard him. He told great stories. So that's why I was kind of quiet. We were on Zoom, and, you know, I was smiling and nodding, but I kept my mouth shut. Don't step on the jokes. Let the funny people be funny is one of the tricks of the trade. Jackie, thank you so much again, everybody. Jokeman, iTunes, Amazon, wherever you get your stuff. July 18th, it is out. More information at jokemanmovie.com. Now, one thing I didn't talk about in the interview with him, he addresses it directly in the documentary, is you do not see any of the people from the Howard Stern show. Billy West and Artie Lang appear, but no Howard, no Robin, no Fred, no Gary. It's weird. He addresses it during the show. I suspect everybody else was afraid to lose a well-paying gig, and why Howard didn't do it? You'd have to ask Howard. And that's your comedy news for today. Jackie, thank you so much. Follow the show for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. If you're a drive-by listener today because you saw Jackie was on, welcome. This is an atypical one, but usually about 10 minutes of comedy headline news every day. Thank you for listening. See you tomorrow.